Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Today is our special guest day, where we will hear from a friend of the ministry who will share their insight and stories on truth in this chaotic world. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, hello, Kathy.
Hello.
Today is guest day, and we have Heath and Rebecca Cardie. They're actually in studio because they live here in Denver, so they could come down. And afterwards, by the way, Linda's going to join us, and we're all going to lunch together. So,
oh, how fun!
It's going to be quite fun. Heath and Rebecca are just really become precious friends of ours, and they're enjoying it, and they give it away. We talk about the covenant, blessed to be a blessing. They've been blessed, and they are giving it away in a big way to their family. We probably won't go into all this. We'll have to have his son and daughter-in-law on, Colton. They've gone through abiding. They've taught him abiding. They came to a retreat. They have some exciting stuff. You talk about God's will. They're really experiencing it right now. Interesting enough, they've been instructed,
very much so,
which I'll have to ask you guys about, to go to Iceland.
Wow.
It's not the end. It's just go there, and I'm going to instruct you next. And so it's really fun.
Oh, fascinating.
It's really fun that they said, yeah, okay, we're going. So anyway, we loved having you guys here. Welcome. Maybe we could start to have the audience learn a little bit about you. How did you each receive Christ?
I actually don't have that single moment. I think for me, I was born and raised in a Christian family, grew up going to church from being an infant, and ended up going to Bible college after high school. And I don't, while I know when I was baptized, I don't have a specific moment, and really thank God that I feel like I've just always known about him, and I've always had that connection. So I don't have like a salvation moment, but I feel like God's been kind of keeping an eye on me my whole life, which I'm very thankful for. So,
Are you a native Coloradan?
No, I'm actually native New Jerseyan. You might even pick up some of that with the accent.
Okay.
When I get excited or I talk too fast, it kind of comes out, and I have a little Rocky Balboa thing going on. So,
what was during that time as you were growing up? When did you, even as an adult, when did you have a desire that I really want to pursue and follow God?
I feel like my whole life, the parable of talents, the Matthew 25 parable of talents, has been really impressed on me. And I can't pinpoint that, but like I was very aware of it as a child growing up, teenager, adult, the whole Matthew, to whom much has been given, much is required. And that being faithful with little, you will be faithful in much. And that I guess I've recognized that God has spared me from a lot of things in some ways, and I've been given things that are completely unwarranted, and I've been I've had this sense of gratitude, but I think with it has come this sense of responsibility, stewardship. And I think kind of the frustrating thing for me was I've known that and felt that my whole life, and that sense of stewardship has been, I would say, kind of a burden I've felt, responsibility, but I didn't really know kind of what that meant. Like it's like carrying a backpack without knowing where you're headed. Is kind of how I might describe it.
Yeah.
So,
that's
not like a moment of lightning kind of thing, but like I've felt the weight of that my whole life, and until we really learned abiding, and until we kind of understood how to hear God's voice and understand that plan, and to kind of see you talk about that next 10 feet. Until that, I'd been living life kind of doing what I felt was God's will from his scriptures and was most logical to me in my own reasoning. And like I knew that was that was like what I was supposed to do, but like I knew it wasn't enough. Like I felt like that was good, and it wasn't like I was off the rails or something, but I knew there was more, and I felt this burden of like I'm gonna have to give an account for all this, and I know I've been given these things that I have to give an account for them. Like but I really don't know how to know what I'm supposed to do with it, and I follow the Bible, the general principles of following His will and Revelation are pretty clear. The specifics for me, what did God want me to do? My purpose, my plan was really, I really had no idea. I'm just going to try to do what He wants me to do, and hope that's what He's looking for.
Yeah. We'll talk about that because that's kind of the essence of what it means to follow God's will. So that's kind of cool. Rebecca, how about you? How did you come to know Christ?
I grew up in Michigan, and I pretty much have the same story as Heath. I grew up in a family where we went to church, and so I feel like I've known God my whole life. And we went to a Bible college, and that's where we met. We met in Texas and decided to get married. He wanted to live in Alaska, and I wanted to live near my family. So Colorado was our compromise.
Well, we weren't abiding. So we just
compromised.
We negotiated. Denver was on negotiation.
It was back before the internet, so we got a book from the library, and we went to a park, and we kind of made a little spreadsheet, and we just decided from a book that this is where we were going to live and raise our children, and it's been great.
Well, we know, Kathy, that Colorado is heaven on earth, so a good choice.
It is a good choice. I don't know if you guys know this or not. My husband and I both went to college in Colorado as well. He went to the Air Force Academy, and I went to Colorado College. So I do have a fondness for Colorado as well, even being a New Englander now.
That's right. I even spent 2 weeks every summer up at the Great East Lake in New Hampshire. So we love New Hampshire as well. So
it is beautiful, right?
Which lake is that?
Great East Lake. It's about an hour from Lake Winnipesaukee. On the border up by Maine. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we go up. We do retreats up there in Squam Lake.
Okay.
We do 2 weeks back to back in October. The colors are there, and
it's a beautiful time to go.
It's beautiful.
It's a great time to be up here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell us, how did you two of you meet, and what led you to get married to each other?
So one of my best friends, who's also still very close, Shad Carnes, who was at the same Bible college and is actually part of our group still. He lives in Cincinnati. He told me about this girl that he had met that sounded pretty interesting. And then we were freshmen in college, and from that, I kept an eye out for her because that wasn't really a respecter of persons. And I thank God we went to a college where it was completely acceptable to go on lots of single dates with lots of different girls. It wasn't like a romantic kind of thing, which was nice. So we were actually, this sounds so cliche, we were at a worship hymn singing thing before church, and I saw her standing there, and I thought she was by herself. She had actually gone with some other guy, but
I was actually on a date with someone else. And he went up. There were 3 different worship leaders that day. He was one of them. So he was up leading worship. And so I was standing there by myself, and Heath came over. And I was too shy to tell him that I was there with the guy who was leading. And so when the guy came back, I was with Heath, and he said, "Oh, looks like you've found something else, something better maybe to do here." So he left.
Apparently
he left
you
us.
did.
And we went up together, and I think we talked for a couple hours. That kind of was the start of it.
So we dated for 3.5, almost 4 years. Got married when we graduated. She actually went back to Michigan and got her degree in sign language interpreting, and I ended up getting a degree in business and theology, and got married right after graduation. So
and right after graduation, where did you live?
Denver. That was our negotiation. So
okay.
we got engaged when we went to the park to figure out where to live. I was applying to some law schools and grad schools, and I had to figure out where to go after my junior year. And so that was going to the park to figure out where we were engaged. I knew I wanted to marry her. I didn't want to live in Michigan, and she wouldn't move to Alaska. So we decided, I actually moved, I graduated a little bit early, moved to Denver with a car and found a really cheap apartment up in North Glen and got started. And then we got married in May. I drove out to Michigan. We got married there. And then we've been here since January. I've been here since January of 93. We've been here since May of 93. So married 28 plus years. So
Wow, beautiful.
Wow.
that was good. So
And then tell us a little bit about after you came out. Walk us through a little bit of your key moments in your careers.
well, I actually, you want to do, why don't you do yours first?
Okay. Mine's probably a little less complicated. I had my degree in sign language interpreting. So I worked actually down here in Castle Rock the first year. I was a sign language interpreter for deaf students at an elementary school
Oh, really?
for a year.
Oh, that's
and
excellent.
I decided I thought that's the age group I wanted to work with. I really didn't enjoy it. And so I ended up moving to a college up in Westminster, and I worked at Front Range Community College. I loved that age. That was my favorite age group to work with. So I worked at Broomfield High School and Front Range Community College for about years until we had children. And then once we had our first son, then I was a stay-at-home mom.
Yep.
Well, and now you do property stuff. So.
Right. And so sometime during that time, we acquired through probably some bad real estate decisions because we were not abiding. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. We decided to get into real estate. But this leads us down a whole other path and has become part of my story and my testimony. In 2006, we became the owners of 4 properties. They're condos. And throughout that time, because we didn't start out intending to rent them, we hadn't read the bylaws, and so we were out of compliance with the bylaws. Yes, and they were threatening to charge us $100 a day if we continued with this nightly and weekly rentals.
Oh, wow.
And so at the time, we didn't know what to do with them. So we went to the church that we were attending, and we told them that we would love to use these furnished rentals for missionaries, if they had missionaries in town, or ministry, if anyone could use them. And so they said, well, there is a family that's here from the Philippines. They're coming for 4 months. They would love to stay there. So that was our first experience with missions, when we had never really met real life missionaries before. We always kind of looked at them as heroes, and these people are amazing, and we got to know them. They came over to our house. They told us all these stories about the Philippines, and as we were talking that first night they came over, I was thinking, this sounds like the scariest place on earth where they live. And Heath was thinking, this sounds amazing. We need to go. We need to take our family there. So it wasn't very many months after that, we drug our 4 children. I think our youngest was maybe 4 at the time. We went and took a family trip to the Philippines. And that was the start of our just loving all things to do with missions. And that was kind of our jumping in head first. And God totally used that experience, which was, for me, a very negative experience, to be out of compliance, and I'm very much a rule follower, and God just used that to just shake up our world and just get us on his path.
That's great. And how many children do you have?
We have 4 boys. They're 5 years apart. The youngest is 18 and the oldest
Is Colton the oldest?
He is.
He is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He's the one that's married. Are any other married besides that one?
Yes. We just had our second son, just got married, and
Yeah.
so 2 married. So
Yeah.
we loved having girls join
Finally.
our brood. It's been great.
That's great.
Heath, how about you? What's a synopsis
So
of your
my
career?
background's been on the finance investing side. Ended up getting a master's in finance from CU. Got a CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst, and worked mostly in the venture capital private equity area for a number of years, until ended up in New York working with some hedge funds on the venture capital side, and we were actually living in Midtown Manhattan on 57th Street, apartment, nanny, all that kind of stuff. And I had decided that, and I can see God's hand as I look back. I couldn't at the time probably, but I decided that I really want, instead of investing money for other people, I wanted to do it myself. So at that point in 2001, ended up buying our first company. And for the past 20 years, we've been basically buying and building and putting companies together and selling them, and it's kind of a small growth equity private buyout strategy. But that first company I bought in 2001 with a great guy who was also a college friend, Joe Arner, and so he and I bought our first company. I had been more on the investing side, added like 2 or 3 more zeros in all the deals I was doing, and then to do this deal, it just seemed kind of simple. But what I really didn't understand was the cost from a cash flow perspective. So I'll make it short, but within 18 months, we went from living in Midtown Manhattan, making a lot of money, before I was 30, to living in Denver, being 3 months behind on my mortgage, all credit cards maxed out, business loans totally gone. And I mean, it was having discussions with my business partner, like, well, I'm 3 months behind on my mortgage and you're 2 months behind on your mortgage. Who's going to take some money out this month? And the company we bought was growing, but that was actually the problem. I didn't really grasp it when we were doing due diligence.
Working capital?
Yeah, it was an asset-based leasing business, which of course looks great on paper when you don't factor in so we had long-term capital needs funded by short-term financing, which is a real mismatch.
Yeah.
And I mean, it didn't start out that way, but that's kind of where it ended up. We continued to grow, but the problem was we just killed all of our capital, long-term capital. And so while on paper we were growing, we were just hemorrhaging cash, and personally we couldn't get to the point. So about 18 months after we had bought it, my poor wife, who's never really been involved in the finances, I mean, she knew we had a whole lot less money than we had before, and working on stuff. But she's at the grocery store, and I'll let you tell that part of it. That's better.
He, out of love, I know now, hadn't told me and shared that with me, how we were doing. And so I was at the grocery store one day, 3 children. I was pregnant with the 4th, and I was checking out, and I went to run my credit card. I'm sorry, ma'am.
Wow.
I went out. I'm sorry, ma'am, that one didn't either. And then I was starting to get nervous. I had 3. The last one didn't go through. And I just left in tears I left my cart. I take my kids, I go out to the car, and I call my husband. What is happening? Like, I'm just bawling. I saw a friend on the way out of the grocery store as I'm crying, and I have kids and no food. And that was when it all came to a head, and he told me what was going on. And
I think that was, no, I need to back up. Wednesday night we went to church at this new church we had never been to before. It was a Wednesday night service, and it was a missionary in town, and he gave a basic message on tithing and giving. And, I've been going to church my whole life. It wasn't like it was some new concept, but and I can see now it was really God speaking to me very clearly about this tithing and giving. It was really convicted, because I had stopped, although I grew up tithing and giving my whole life, I had stopped as the business had, I was taking out a little bit of money here and there, but I had stopped as the business was struggling, really because of pride. For me, I believe it was about pride and who's in control. And I think I was saying, look, God, yeah, I'll get back to it once I can do it. But like, you don't understand. I need to use this money for this and whatever. So that was Wednesday. Sorry, Thursday is when she called me at work crying because none of her credit cards, she couldn't even buy groceries. I'm like, but honey, we're building equity.
You can't eat equity.
Yeah, she's like, can I buy groceries with equity? I'm like, no.
Hey, but we're really doing fine
with 3 kids.
I'm like, but
she
equity-wise,
we're not doing as fine as you think.
So Friday, I finally broke down to God. I'm like, all right, God, like I've been trying to do this on my own. For me, it's all been about pride. It's really been about control. And I think I had $300 in cash, which I was going to pay my insurance, which I didn't. And I'm like, all right. On Friday, I said, I'm just going to give this as my tithe, which was about my tithe for the month, maybe. And so on Sunday, went and tithe, which I hadn't done for a long time. Went went to a new church, which we actually still are at. And tithed on Sunday. Monday morning at 10 a.m., I get this phone call from this guy, and he says, "Hey," he says, I found your company on the internet." He's like, I don't know what to do. He's like, "I have this huge deal in Chicago." He said, the deal fell apart on Saturday. And, you know, I've worked with these guys for years. The deal just fell apart on Saturday. He's like, "I don't know what to do. I have 900 pieces of equipment that I need to get out of here in the next 2 weeks." And he's like, I found you guys on the internet. It looks like you guys have something. And it was this whole, in the equipment leasing, we were buying equipment, we'll say for $500, and we were leasing it out for $30 a month. That's great. But it's very capital intensive. And of course there's operating costs and all that. This guy called and said, "Look," he said, I'll sell you this stuff for $25 each. It's the same quality. Everything's the same. I just don't know what to do. Can you guys take it?" And it was this entire little cottage industry I had no idea existed. I didn't know him from Adam. I had never even heard of what he was telling me. I almost didn't believe it, except that it was 10 a.m. after I had tithed. And you know, you don't need an MBA to figure out if you buy something for $25 and you rent it out for $30 a month for 15 years. 15 years, that may be a good business.
Yeah.
So we ended up from that one phone call. Not that everything was solved that minute, but it really was long term. From that one phone call, we ended up growing the second largest company in the country in this whole industry.
Wow.
We ended up selling it a couple times. And then we've gone on to do other companies. And there's many other instances, like I won't get the whole business. I have a whole business testimony, which is neat to share with business people and kind of get some more details. But I can see clearly how God has been at work. And we have been blessed. But the neat thing is I would have naturally, given my own pride and inclination, I would have taken credit for it all. And the cool thing is God was like, "Well, when you were doing it, this is basically where you ended up." And your wife is crying and she can't buy groceries. When you turned it over to me, this is so. We have been successful in some ways, but it's really neat because I can take zero credit for it. Actually, the opposite. And God has really clearly delineated that, which is probably what I needed, like a 2x4 over the head, to be real clear on it. So it's been real neat to see that. And that's just, you know, pre-abiding 20 some years ago, but like it is night and day. So I always believed in God. I know he cares, he's involved. I just never knew how to kind of tap into that.
Yeah. So Rebecca, you evidently were able to buy food eventually, right?
Yes. Turned around a little bit.
So now I've eaten too much food. So.
What a great story. So as you've been exposed to living waters, you and a group came and learned about abiding. Talk about that. What have you learned about abiding? How has that impacted your life? And then we're going to segue to that into discerning God's will, which I know has had a big impact. But what has abiding meant to each of you?
I think for me, when you start out the abiding weekend with the John 15, and just explaining how if we abide in him, he will abide in us, and that's all we have to do is abide. And I had heard that many, many times, and it just didn't make sense to me. I think we grew up in a very legalistic church, which helped, and just feeling like, but I have to do something. Like, what do I need to do? And that part, for me, when you start out the weekend with that was so exciting to me to know that, okay, well, all I have to do is learn how to stay connected, and he will produce the fruit. And that's not something that I need to conjure up more patience or more love or more joy, but that will just come. And then giving us the tools on how to do that, the Center Cross-Reference Bible and the concordance, and just having the tools now to do that, because I had done Bible time and had my quiet time before, but it's just completely changed the way that I have my quiet time now with God, and it is just been just life altering.
Yes, yeah, beautiful.
I'll even back up a little bit. So we did a abiding in the vine retreat, but I didn't even know what it was. So we were invited by the CEO forum to go, one of the other guys had done it before, but we'd been married 26 years, never done a marriage retreat, and I really wasn't interested. And but because it was from this business group, and I heard that Rich was a private equity guy. He wasn't like a psychotherapist or something. I was like, well, I kind of felt guilty that I had never done anything. I'm like, well, if I have to do a marriage retreat, this is probably the one I would do. And, maybe I'll get credit for going and for initiating the idea with my wife and stuff. So I agreed to do it. I had no idea what it was. And I was worried it was going to be like 48 hours of people like crying and talking about feelings and, having emotions, and which my wife says I don't have emotions, which
telling everybody how you made your wife not have food, that kind of
right. Yeah, right. There were lots of things I don't want to talk about. I don't want to talk about all these kind of things, and so, but it turns out, like, in some ways, I think the marriage weekend is kind of a label for marketing, because it's really about how to, no offense, but it works, because what it really is, and it took me a while to kind of, I didn't even know where he was going when he started. You probably picked up on it faster than me, but it's really about hearing God's voice, abiding, how to know God's will, to discern that in your life, which of course I can see now is the greatest thing you can do for your marriage. And
yes.
it is a marriage weekend, and our marriage has been completely changed and has never been better because of it all. So it wasn't the marriage weekend I feared. It was actually much more than that, and I'm very, very thankful I went, even though I didn't have a clue what I was doing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I know that one of the things you did pretty quick is you started teaching your kids that. How did they receive it, and what difference has it made in their life?
That's an interesting story. You want to talk about?
No.
Well, we did. So we started. It started. I mean, it really changed us, and our kids saw it, and we started talking to them about it, and they saw it. So we were doing a family trip. By this point, one of them was married. We had one in college, and we were doing a family trip. That a few months later, and we asked them, "Do you want to learn? Do you want to learn how to do this? What mom and dad have been doing?" And they all said, "Oh yeah, for sure." So we.
Oh, that's great.
Rich helped me, and it wasn't quite the same, but we took 4 days and spent a couple hours each day in the morning. We were actually up in beautiful Juneau, Alaska, so back to Alaska. And,
nice.
So spent a couple hours every morning just teaching them how to abide and what that looks like, and how to have a personal relationship with God. And they all tried it. I actually did a really poor job of kind of following up with them, like I should have, because I didn't want to pressure them, but at the same time I wanted to be a resource, and I don't think I did well at that. But our daughter-in-law took off with it, did amazing. Our son, who's married to her, worked on it some. The other ones did things here and there, and then it's continued to be. Well, they just did it again. Their brother. Well, you tell them that part. So.
From abiding, the oldest one felt convicted that he had fall on being a leader with his brothers when he had influence in their life, or could have had influence in their life. So when he was home for the second one wedding in July, one morning he sat down and shared how he abides with them. So I think that just the repetition and hearing it from someone more closer to their age, and also at that point then he had been to the retreat as well.
Right.
So I think he had better resources, more prepared to be able to share with them. So I think they're getting it little by little.
So they have their own group now where they share their abiding, what they're hearing, and they've been doing it more. The second one has been doing it better as well. We me and another guy from our group were actually with him over Thanksgiving for a while, and he and another kid who were working together, we were able to take them through it again. They actually came to us and they're like, we see this. We were doing a bunch of business meetings back to back, and that's a whole another thing that we were doing. But we were doing business meetings back to back, and they got to come to some of those, and they actually saw like in the morning, a word that I would get or Fletcher would get, and we would kind of connect. And they actually saw God moving in action. And they came to us and they're like, I know you taught us that before, my son said, but could you show us again? Like, he was 20 at the time. So you can, it wasn't, and he was like, wait a minute, like this, I see this actually happening right in front of me. And what God says is that what God happens. And then God tells you to do this in the morning, you do it, and like the entire meeting changes and like things change. And with bank vice presidents and with government officials, like it's just really neat to see. He saw it right in front of his face. They were like, wait a minute, what did you say again? Can you teach us that? So from then he's been doing a lot more, and it led to him getting engaged, getting married. That was one of the reasons. Obviously she was rather interesting as well, but that was part of the decision for him. And then they've been doing it since this. It's been really neat to see it just with that next generation. And God talks about your children and there's so much in there on that, but to see some of that kind of coming out. And we got lots of other issues, and the younger two are doing it some. I think the youngest one's actually been getting more with it. And so I've been convicted, and it's not just my oldest son helping them. I need to be helping them more as well. Which,
and Kathy, you'll love this. Angie, his daughter-in-law, the oldest, she had a staff position with FCA, Fellowship for Christian.
Oh, really? Excellent.
So Heath sends me an article that she writes that went to all the staff around the world. And it was on abiding John 15.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
Heath just sent it to me and said, does this look familiar? And she was giving it away and stated it really beautifully. This is what abiding looks like. And so it's amazing, how they're giving it away.
She's actually been training people one-on-one and mentoring people.
Yes.
Quite a few of them in abiding.
Yes.
You talk
That's
about giving
beautiful.
it away. That's what she's been doing. So
as we, one of the benefits as we teach it in the abiding retreat is discovering, understanding God's will, which you and I are talking about, right now.
Yes.
And following God and learning to come to unity and process together. So talk a little bit about how has that part of it impacted the way you guys make decisions. And I know even you're part of a small group and you're helping each other make decisions. How does that, what have you experienced with that, and how does that work in a practical way for you?
You want to talk? So it's been, on the marriage side, it's been really neat. I think the biggest thing that I learned from the weekend was that it just kind of hit me, was that the Holy Spirit that's in me is the same as the Holy Spirit that's in Rebecca.
Yeah.
And so the Holy Spirit's not going to tell me one thing and her another thing. We're one, in that if I am hearing the Holy Spirit, she's hearing the Holy Spirit, he's going to be telling us the same thing. So so instead of like, I would like to 3 and she wants 1, maybe we would get together and compromise and get 2, or maybe I would just argue her out of it and we would get 3 anyway or something.
Land in Denver.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So instead of this compromising, negotiating, both sides feeling like, well, I'm not really happy, but it's, this works for both of us, and maybe I'll give more this time and she'll give more next time. Or it's that understanding that no, there is the Holy Spirit and God's will can be made clear to both of us. And I actually don't want, and coming to neutral, and I don't want, I truly do not want my will. You said God's will is best and none better. And that I really want God's will and God's answer. And it's, I start off with what I think I want, but I do believe we're getting better, and it's getting easier and easier to be like, well, this is my initial thoughts, but I truly want, because we've seen it now. We've seen examples of God giving answers that wasn't, and maybe it is actually maybe it is 3, or maybe it's 1, and maybe it's 7. I mean, maybe it's not even on the map of what we're thinking, but truly believing that, we're both seeking God's will, not a negotiation, not a compromise. And that's been, I think that was the biggest thing from that weekend. And it's been, I mean, we're a work in progress, and it's still something that we have to do. But I feel like we're getting a lot. I mean, our discussions are all around that, instead of I want, you want, how can we find a compromise kind of thing.
And isn't it really so much more freeing to do that? That's something we found, just the same thing, when we went through, and just that realization that the pressure is not on us. And in fact, I don't need to force my will, or try to win the argument or whatever, that our hearts truly are to have best and none better, and to follow God's will. So don't let him cave to mine. I want us to fight for hearing from God. And there's this freedom and this lightness, and I know you guys, it sounds like you have lived on both sides of that in decision making. So now seeing how it works to come to unity and the blessing of that, you don't want to go back, right?
And I think for me, it's taken the resentment out of it that I used to feel when it would be his way. It just always felt like it was his way. And now, even if it is,
because I thought it was your way half the time.
It's God's way, and that's what we want, is God's way.
Right.
And I have so much peace about that.
Yeah.
Our marriage is so much better because of that.
Right. The resentment and the blame. It also removes the blame potential as well, because just knowing that God's leading it, and that we're along for. Yeah.
And as we've talked about, God says, I'll instruct you on the steps and the path. I know you're facilitating God's will for your son and daughter-in-law, who, process, what are we hearing? What are we understanding? And their question is legitimate, is we feel something bigger. We're not sure what it is. Would you show us? And that's their fundamental question. And they both have a heart to truly receive and give it away. So they know it's not just make us happy. It's where do you want us to fulfill your kingdom purposes, for us. So, they're in the middle of that and processing that. And they got a pretty unusual set of instructions. What did, and I know you've been facilitating that with them. What did they receive? How did they process that as you help them to understand God's will?
It has been life-changing for them. So they are 23. They've been married for 2 years. He's been active in some commercial real estate. She has been full-time with Fellowship of Christian Athletes, as well as a part-time coach, Xavier University. She's an Olympic qualified swimmer, big athlete. And so as they've been going through this, and it's been since the abiding retreat that they did with you in Nashville, and they've been getting more clarity. And she had gotten some stuff before, I think after the retreat, and then really processing with you, Rich, is a lot of it as well. But they feel, and they both have complete unity and clarity that God has told them that they live in Cincinnati, that their time there was 2 years, and that their time is up. Well, that's August 20th. And so actually on August 20th, they are leaving. So they have sold all their vehicles. They have rented their house out. They have packed up all their things. And what God hasn't said is what they're to do. And they do have, they do have income from Colton's investments, and so that's able to fund them. But they are leaving, and they don't know where they're going. Their plan is, and they are going to Iceland. We were going to Iceland anyway. I was hey, do you want to come? And they're like, sure. So they're going to come to Iceland, which I don't believe is the final destination, but they're going to go to Iceland. They have a one-way ticket, and they're going to wait, and they'll be there waiting, seeking, abiding, the asking, seeking, knocking, waiting for God to show them the next step. And we actually got to have breakfast with Colton and with Rich on Monday, and it was neat. I think Colton was very encouraged by your comments. Went back and shared with Alicia, and it'll be neat for us. We are coming back from Iceland. We have a ticket home. So
You have a round trip ticket.
we have a round trip ticket, but it will be exciting to have kind of a front line seat on what this is. And if you had known his wife, you would understand how big of a step this is, which is just amazing. And Colton's always been kind of laid back and somewhat disorganized, and so probably not as uncomfortable for him, but for her, she's an amazing woman, and but for her to be unscheduled and to be completely waiting is just awesome to see. And what God's been doing with them is really fun to watch, and I know there's a lot more coming, and it's going to be amazing to see what God does.
Yeah. One thing you said, and maybe you could discuss it a little bit further, they're going to wait for the next step. One thing that Kathy and I have been sharing about God's will, it's a path, not a destination. And it's step by step by step.
Yes.
And it's a joy because, and you kind of represent this, that we see them having intimacy with God, but they're also having intimacy with you. You're their community. You're facilitating the process. Take a step. Let me help you confirm the step. Take a step. Don't try to go too far. Don't look for just give me the punchline. How have you learned that about you guys taking steps, and why that's so significant, as opposed to, well, just give me the answer?
I think the verse that God's word is a lamp to our feet, not a floodlight, and it doesn't illuminate the entire street. It's just enough for the next step. I think that has been very key for us, and knowing that we don't need to know 10 steps down the path. Of course, we would like to know, but we probably aren't ready to know. We just need to know the very next place where we put down our foot. I also, at the very beginning of when we first took abiding, I was taking Priscilla Shire's Hearing the Voice of God Bible study. And she said in there that it's the same as getting in your car and the GPS. It doesn't read all of the instructions when you first sit down and tell you, turn right on Ward Road and then turn left on Independence Street. And then it doesn't read them all.
Right.
It tells you just before you need to know. And it just in the right amount of time before you need to know.
That's a good illustration.
You hear that. And so if we heard it all read to us on our road trip at the beginning, we wouldn't remember it. It wouldn't make sense to us. And
we might question it.
Unnecessary at that point. So that just knowing that in the right time, God will let us know where we put our foot. And I think that was a challenge for us in the beginning, because we were trying to figure out, when we heard something, we thought, oh, well, maybe that must be what this is. We were trying to guess and figure it out, and we were trying to bring Hagar into, we kept doing that.
We were? I would have remembered that.
So for me, it's hard not to do that, and just to wait and be patient for the next step, and not second guessing what that thing is going to be.
Yeah. And by not second guessing, you're just trusting.
Right.
Well, let's just go this step. We don't need to say, well, did we make a mistake, or just take that step. Now what?
Now what?
I think with Colton and Alicia as well, you really helped them, because I think that they had felt like God was speaking Philippines to them.
Right.
And then when you helped them go back through and say, wait, did he actually say the Philippines?
Right.
He's given you these words, but did he say where? And when they looked back, say the Philippines. So that's what they know, that God has spoken and that it's supposed to be somewhere, and now they're waiting for that.
Right.
What a beautiful story.
That really is. Any other thoughts on particularly because you and I are similar, we would just like the punchline.
Oh yeah, right.
Just give me the answer. Let's
just
go.
Like, I'll figure it out. I'm a business guy. like I spend my life making strategies and plans, and I can develop all these kind of things. Which is my first thought is, okay, God, just give me the big vision and I'll map it out for you. And it's been a completely different mindset for me. And I think God's given me a lot of words about don't get ahead of where I'm working, be where you're at the next 10 feet. I couldn't even get it or understand it even if you showed it to me. So it's been a completely different way to think than I ever have in business. In some ways, it's much more freeing, though. It takes the stress off. It takes off. And I think, as we've all witnessed with 2020 and kind of the world changing so much, is that we don't know what's around the corner, and we don't know what's going to happen. The things that may have seemed completely logical in January or February of last year really would make no sense in April or May. And seeing that, I think some even help solidify for me, wait, I need God leading every step. And I can't be doing these things with my own reasoning because, my argument may make sense for the factors that are known. I know nothing compared to what he knows. And it's been a big change for me, but I can't imagine doing it a different way now.
Yeah. So. And as you look at that step by step, God says, I'm going to bring community with you so that, you two are a community, you're a community with your son and you have a small group that is used to now because they've gone through abiding, helping each other process God's will. Just talk briefly about the value of the community. Why is that such a thrill to have a community around you, both as a couple, family, and small group that really assist your life?
Been amazing. We just actually met with them. We just spent the past several days together. There's one couple that lives out of town. Yeah. And so they were in. And so we tried to spend as much time as we could together the past few days. And we were actually just talking about the value of that and how important that's been on our walk as we've learned to abide, and how sometimes when we get stuck, we're able to encourage each other. We're able to bounce ideas off one another. We shared our dreams with each other, like literally when we have a dream, we share those with each other. We share words that we get with each other. We just completed a 21-day fast together where it was like a tag team fast. So someone was always fasting on each 24-hour period. And it has really just brought us together. Yeah. It's unified our group. And we were talking that maybe some of us wouldn't have continued abiding had we maybe would have gotten stuck or just come to a dry spell where we thought, well, maybe this, I'm not quite sure what to do here. And but I think just having that community around us has really helped us to continue and to be strong and edifying and building each other.
Yeah, it's been so the guys, there's 5 couples. The guys in the group had been doing some business missions work for about 5 years before we started this. We had been going to some different countries, and we actually have an investment fund in Africa, and we've been doing some things together. So we had been spending time together in business and missions, and we had kind of been building that relationship. And we were together back in March of last year. Rebecca and I had done the abiding retreat in January 2020, and then in March of 2020, we were at our house. Not all the guys, some of the guys, and all the COVID stuff was crazy back then. This was like end of March. COVID stuff was crazy, and one of the guys asked a question. He said, "What would God do with 5 of us, with 5 men who would actually just ask God what to do and do it? Like, what if the 5 of us just?" And like I said, we've been together doing some things, some wins, some losses, and just feeling like, yeah, there's something here, and we love doing this together, but like there's got to be more. And that was the question. So he asked, what would God do if 5 guys, and it turns out to be 5 couples, would just ask God and just do it, like just obey? And I said, I actually know. He's like, but how would we hear it? And how would we know? I was like, I know a guy. I'm like, I know a guy. So I I said, there's this guy down in Castle Rock who he's a business guy too. Like he gets it. So we did a retreat there a couple months later, and it has been an amazing journey ever since. We've done 2 more weekend retreats on different topics. We formally meet twice a week, and then more one-on-one. We have these big gatherings with the 10 of us. The 10 of us have been doing, and the 10 of us have been in Africa and stuff together before. So it's kind of like a small group on steroids, I guess. But it has just completely changed, not just my abiding, but our entire life. And we feel like God has been revealing and showing assignments to us as a group. Of course, Rebecca and I together, but even as a group, some of the stuff that we've been, and it's assignments, of course, that only 5 or 10 could do together. It's not something that, so the stuff we're getting has just been really interesting and exciting. And then Rebecca talked about kind of ping-ponging back and forth between each other with encouragement, with everything from dreams and visions to strategies and plans, and God detailing even small parts of kind of that next step to one person or another person. And really Rich has been a mentor and a guide in helping us process that. And he's really spoken into things like finding unity in the group, and how do we deal when there's not unity, or allowing that one voice in the group that, God using one person to kind of sound the alarm and to say, hey, this is not right. But then also helping us kind of process some of the different things that we've been getting. So it's been, and then even within that group, a lot of the second, we talked about our son, but it's not just us. A lot of the other couples are seeing some of their kids that are kind of getting the fire and are abiding and are hearing things and they say, hey, wait, God, I'm 20 something. God has a purpose for my life, and God wants to do this, and God can talk to me. It's just been really, really cool.
It's beautiful. So that, what a great example, Mark and Heath, of the joy of their intimate fellowship along with God, their joint fellowship as a couple, unity with their kids, their small group. You and I have talked about, and we're going to keep talking about, the abundant life. They got stuff that they're trying to sort through, but the abundant life is that, is
yes,
we know that God's going to resolve it. We know that God's going to give us clarity, just like his kids going off and saying, we don't have any idea, but we know it's going to happen, and
right.
So what a thrill. So thank you so much for both of you joining us and sharing your story. It's been so beautiful to have people hear what you have to say, and we're excited. Linda and I are excited to be part of it and to keep.
Oh, you are part of it.
Experiencing all that you have. And so Kathy, again, it's just a joy to have them. And
yeah, thanks so much for sharing your story. I haven't had the privilege of meeting y'all until today. And so
hopefully
just to hear, I know we would love that. But just to hear your story, and really what you just described in your community is a beautiful picture of the Acts Church. And I think the way that God is just igniting believers everywhere, he is really calling them to hear his voice and to abide, and highlighting the time is now. The time is now. And then as your children, a beautiful picture, as your children in each of these 5 families are witnessing you guys just simply listening to God and abiding and seeking him, and then following what he's saying and receiving what he's speaking, they can't help but want that too. And that's the ripple effects. That's the multiplication. When we simply elevate God, he is glorified, and other people want to know and want to hear. And you guys are living that out so beautifully. So thank you. Thanks for sharing the story.
Yeah, thanks you so much. Kathy, we'll see you tomorrow for End Times Friday.
Sounds great.
So that'll be fun, and we'll continue that discussion. So,
all right. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.